That morning, after Daniel hung up, I made my first call. Not to the police.
I had a stroke alone in a parking lot. The paramedics said if the woman behind me hadn't spotted me slumped against my car door, I might not have made it. My son was 4 states away at a casino resort in Las Vegas. I know because I saw the photos myself, chips stacked high on a green felt table, a glass of something amber in his hand, grinning at the camera like a man without a single worry in the world. The hospital tried to reach him for 3 days. When he finally called me back, his first question wasn't, "Are you okay, Mom?" It was, "Did you already talk to a lawyer about the house?" That question saved my life. Not medically, but in every way that actually matters. Before we go any further, if you've ever felt invisible to the people you sacrificed everything for, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to know where you're watching from, your city, your state, your country. It matters more than you know. And just so you're aware, some details in this story have been adjusted for privacy and narrative purposes. The emotions, the betrayal, and the healing, those are all completely real. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Mercy General Hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. I held the hands of strangers on their worst days. I talked frightened patients through procedures that terrified them. I worked double shifts, missed holidays, came home with my feet aching and my heart full because that work meant something. When I retired 4 years ago, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I had my small house on Clover Street, my vegetable garden, my 2 cats, and my son, my only child, living 40 minutes away with his wife and my 9-year-old granddaughter. I thought that was enough. I thought proximity meant closeness. I was wrong about that for a long time. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. I'd driven to the Harris Teeter on Moorhead Street the way I did every week. Same list, same route, same parking spot near the cart return because I always figured someone needed it more than me. I just loaded the last bag into my trunk when I felt it. Not pain exactly, more like the world tilting sideways. My left hand stopped working first. Then my face went strange, one side of it heavy and foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I reached for the car door to steady myself and missed. The next thing I remember is a voice. A young woman's voice, clear and urgent, saying, "Ma'am, don't move. I've already called 911. Her name was Danny. She was 28 years old, a pharmacy technician who happened to be walking to her car 3 spaces down. She stayed with me on that asphalt, held my head in her lap, kept talking to me even when I couldn't talk back. She rode in the ambulance. She gave the ER staff my name, my age, and the emergency contact number she found in my phone under my son. He didn't answer. She tried 4 more times over the next 2 hours. Voicemail every single time. She left 2 messages, calm, factual, her voice steady in a way that must have cost her something. "Mrs. Margaret has had a stroke. She's at Mercy General. Please call the hospital immediately." The hospital itself called 6 more times that first day. Nobody picked up. I was unconscious for most of those first 36 hours. The stroke had affected the left side of my brain. The doctors were cautious, measured. They told me later that the first 48 hours were the most critical. During those 48 hours, Danny slept in the family waiting room. She called her supervisor, rearranged her schedule, and did not leave. She barely knew me. We'd met 5 months earlier in line at that same pharmacy. I'd noticed her struggling to explain a medication interaction to an elderly gentleman who kept shaking his head in confusion, and I'd stepped in old nurse habit and helped translate the medical language into something he could hold on to. She'd thanked me afterward. We'd talked for maybe 10 minutes. I learned her name. She learned I was a retired nurse. That was the full extent of our relationship, and yet when I needed someone, she was the one who showed up. My son was not. When I finally opened my eyes on day 2, the room was quiet and gray with early morning light. My right hand had some feeling back. My speech was slow but returning. The first face I saw was a nurse I didn't know checking my monitors. The second face I saw was Danny, upright in a chair by the window, dark circles under her eyes, a hospital blanket pulled over her shoulders, her phone face down in her lap. Not my son's face. I asked the nurse about him. She was kind but careful. "We've been trying to reach your emergency contact," she said. "We haven't been able to connect." I asked Danny to check her phone. She'd received no callback. She showed me her call log and I counted between her and the hospital. 14 attempts over 2 days. 14. Can you check something for me? I asked. My voice was rougher than usual, dragged through gravel. Can you look him up on Instagram? Danny hesitated. I could see her weighing it. She found his account, turned the phone toward me slowly, like she was handing me something breakable. He was in Las Vegas. The first photo had been posted the morning after I collapsed, a wide shot of the Strip at night, his arm around a man I recognized as his college friend, both of them laughing beneath a marquee sign. The caption said, "First real vacation in 2 years. Leaving work at the door. Living." The next post came Tuesday evening, a video of him at a blackjack table, chips stacked in front of him, a cocktail in his right hand. The caption said, "When the cards are running hot." Then Wednesday afternoon, a brunch photo on an open-air terrace, eggs Benedict, a mimosa, sunglasses, the Las Vegas skyline blurring in the background behind him. Caption, "No emails. No obligations. Just this." He had cell service. He had Wi-Fi. He had taken 14 phone calls worth of time to post 4 pieces of his vacation to the public internet. He had not called his mother back once. I handed Danny's phone back to her. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I closed my eyes, and in the quiet of that hospital room with the monitors beeping their steady rhythm, something shifted in me. Not grief, not yet, something harder, something clear. The neurologist came in that morning. Dr. Okafor, a tall woman with careful hands and direct eyes who reminded me a little of a colleague I'd admired for years. She sat down, which I appreciated. Doctors who sit down are telling you something. She explained the stroke, the affected region, the expected recovery timeline. I would need speech therapy. I would need physical therapy. I would need monitoring and follow-up and significant rest. But I had gotten there fast enough, she said. The outcome could have been catastrophically different. Someone had acted quickly. I looked at Danny when Dr. Okafor said that. My son called on day 3, late afternoon. I was awake and sitting up. Danny had stepped out to get coffee. The phone on the bedside table lit up with his name, and I sat there for 2 full rings before I answered. Mom. His voice had that particular quality I'd learned over the years, the one he used when he was preparing a narrative. Warm on the surface, rehearsed underneath. "Oh my God, Mom, I just got your messages. I'm so sorry. The reception out there was unbelievable. We were basically off the grid. You posted to Instagram 4 times, I said. Silence. I'm fine, I said. I had a stroke. Surgery wasn't required, but I've been here 3 days. A stranger sat with me. Mom, The hospital called 14 times. More silence. Then the pivot, I'd seen it coming. I'm getting on the first flight I can find. I'll be there tonight, tomorrow morning at the latest. I love you, Mom. You know that, I'm coming. He arrived the following morning. His wife came too, which surprised me. She stood slightly behind him in the doorway of my hospital room, a position I recognized as deliberate. She was there as witness, or buffer. I hadn't decided yet which. He hugged me. I let him. His cologne was expensive and familiar, and for just a moment something in me wanted to collapse into it, wanted to be the mother who believed the hug was enough, but I'd been a nurse for 31 years. I'd learned to pay attention to what people did when they thought the crisis had passed. I watched his eyes move around the room before they settled on me. I watched him clock the IV line, the monitoring equipment, the discharge paperwork folder on the tray table. I watched him calculate. He stayed 3 hours. We talked about the stroke, about my recovery plan, about the physical therapy schedule. He was attentive, asked questions, took notes on his phone. His wife brought a bag with some things from my house toiletries, a change of clothes, my reading glasses. It felt organized, efficient, like they had divided a task list. Before he left, he said it casually, in the voice people use when they're trying to sound like something just occurred to them. You know, while you're going through all this, Mom, it might be a good time to make sure your affairs are all in order. Power of attorney, that kind of thing. Just so things are easier if, God forbid, there's ever another incident. His wife looked out the window. I told him we'd talk about it when I was home. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. Danny drove me. My son had a conflict, a work thing, he said. something that couldn't be moved. He would come by that weekend. He sent a fruit basket that arrived before I did. The first week home was slow and careful. I moved through my own house like it was slightly unfamiliar, the way you do when your body has been through something that changed the instructions. Danny came every other day. She helped me with exercises, made sure I was eating properly, sat with me through the hours when the silence got heavy. She was not obligated to do any of this. I told her so, more than once. She said I know, and kept coming anyway. It was on one of those quiet afternoons that she found the envelope. She'd been helping me sort through the mail that had accumulated while I was in the hospital, a week and a half of envelopes and catalogs and insurance statements piled on my kitchen counter. She was handing them to me one at a time when she paused. Her expression changed. She set the envelope in front of me without saying anything. The return address read Hargrove and Associates, attorneys at law. The postmark was dated 4 days before my stroke. Inside was a letter, professional and formal, addressed to me. It referenced a consultation regarding durable power of attorney, specifically, a conversation their office had conducted, with a family member inquiring about the process for assuming legal decision-making authority over an elderly parent's financial and medical affairs, in cases where the parent was deemed unable to manage their own affairs independently. The letter asked me to schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss next steps. I had never contacted this law firm. I had never had a conversation with anyone about power of attorney. I had no idea this letter was coming. Danny watched my face as I read it. "Do you recognize that firm?" she asked. I didn't. I sat there with the letter in my hands and let the information settle. My son had contacted a lawyer about taking control of my affairs before I ever had the stroke. He had initiated that process. And then, 4 days later, I collapsed in a parking lot, and he didn't come home for 3 days. Not because he was grieving or scared, because he was waiting. The pattern assembled itself in my mind piece by piece, the way things do when you've been refusing to see them clearly. 2 months before the stroke, he had called my neighbor Helen to ask how I seemed to be doing. Was I getting confused? Was I forgetting things? Had I had any falls? He'd framed it as concern. Helen had told me about the call in passing, mentioned she'd reassured him I was sharp as ever, and I'd filed it away as a son checking in on his mother. I hadn't let myself read it for what it was. 3 weeks before the stroke, he'd stopped by unexpectedly and asked if he could look over my filing cabinet just to help organize things, he'd said. I told him it was fine. I hadn't been in the room with him the whole time. Now the letter from Hargrove and Associates was in my hands, and I understood that I had not been disorganized. I had been assessed. I called my friend Roberta that evening. Roberta had been my closest friend for 22 years, a retired school teacher with a mind like a steel trap and zero patience for anyone who talked down to her. She listened to everything without interrupting, which was how I knew she was angry. Roberta only went quiet like that when she was very, very angry. "He called me too," she said when I finished. I went still. "About 6 weeks ago. Said he'd been thinking about your situation, asked if I'd noticed any changes in you, whether you seemed disoriented, whether you'd mentioned feeling unsafe alone. I told him you'd reorganized your entire kitchen 2 weeks prior and beaten me at Scrabble 3 times in a row." She paused. I thought he was just being a nervous son. I should have told you. 2 women. 2 phone calls. The same script. I thought about the power of attorney letter. I thought about the Las Vegas photos. I thought about his first question when he called. "Did you already talk to a lawyer about the house?" The house Philip and I had bought together 34 years ago. The house I'd paid off by myself after Philip died. The house my son had never shown any particular attachment to until real estate prices in Charlotte started climbing. I had been a nurse. I knew what it looked like when someone was building a case. You gathered data. You established a baseline. You documented. And then you waited for the event that would let you act on it. He had gathered his data. He had been waiting for his event. My stroke had been exactly that, an opportunity. The realization didn't arrive with fury. It arrived with something quieter and colder, the way the real truths usually do. My son had not failed to come home because he was scared or negligent or even particularly callous in that moment. He had failed to come home because coming home too quickly would have disrupted the position he was establishing. If I recovered fully and he'd been absent, that could be managed. If I didn't recover, he'd be in a much stronger position to step in as the appropriate decision-maker, grieving son, concerned family member, the only person withstanding. I had raised a man who was doing the arithmetic on his mother. I sat in my kitchen with the letter in front of me and I thought about Philip, who had died of pancreatic cancer 8 years ago in this same house, in a hospital bed we'd rented and installed in the living room so he could see the backyard. I had taken a leave of absence from the hospital to care for him those last 3 months. Our son had come twice, once for a weekend in month 2, once for 2 days near the end. He'd cried at the funeral, real tears, and I had held him and told him it was okay. I had made excuses then too. Busy career, young family. Grief works differently in everyone. But sitting here now, reading a lawyer's letter that had been sent before I ever knew I was sick, I thought about those 2 visits, and I stopped making excuses. I called a woman named Patricia Osei the following morning. She was an estate attorney who had handled Philip's will and who had sent me a card when I was discharged from the hospital, written in her own handwriting, that said simply, "So glad you're on the mend. Don't hesitate if you need anything." I had kept the card on my counter, without knowing why. Maybe some part of me already knew. "Patricia," I said when she answered, "I need to change my will. All of it." She asked me to come in. I asked if Danny could come with me. She said of course. I spent an hour in Patricia's office the following Thursday. I told her everything: the letter, the phone calls to Roberta and Helen, the 3 days of unanswered calls from the hospital, the Instagram posts, the question about the lawyer. Patricia listened without expression, which was the expression of someone who had heard this before and was not surprised by it. When I finished, she said, "Your instincts are correct, and your options are clear." She laid them out. A trust for my granddaughter protected, inaccessible to her parents, until she reached adulthood. Charitable bequests in Philip's name. A specific gift for Danny. My son would receive $1, which in legal language meant he received acknowledgement that the omission was intentional and not an oversight. "Are you certain?" Patricia asked me. "This is permanent." I had been a nurse for 31 years. I had held the hands of people at the end of their lives. I had never once heard anyone say from that place, "I wish I had let someone treat me worse for longer." "I'm certain," I said. We scheduled the estate meeting for the following week. My son had been calling regularly since he'd returned from Las Vegas, attentive in the new way, questions about my health, suggestions about my care, soft mentions of how complicated it must be to manage everything alone at my age. I told him I wanted to go over some estate matters. His voice changed in a way I recognized. He said he and his wife would be there. I wore the green blazer Philip had always said, made me look like someone not to be argued with. Patricia's conference room had the serious gravity of a place where real things happened. Danny sat beside me. My son and his wife arrived together, dressed like they were heading to a closing, him in a charcoal suit, her in a blazer, both of them carrying the energy of people who believed they were there to collect something. My son stopped when he saw Danny. "What is she doing here?" "She's here because I asked her to be," I said. "Sit down." They sat. Patricia sat at the head of the table. The room settled. I spoke first. I told him calmly that I knew about Hargrove and Associates. I watched the color shift in his face. I put the letter on the table. I told him I knew about the phone calls to Roberta and to Helen, the same questions, the same language, the same quiet campaign to establish that I was declining. I told him I had screenshots of every Instagram post, time-stamped against the hospital's 14 call attempts. I placed those on the table too. His wife looked at the table. He started with the explanation he'd prepared. He'd been concerned. He just wanted things in place in case something happened. He hadn't expected the timing to work out this way. It was all a terrible coincidence. Surely I could understand that a son would want to look after his mother. "You were 4 states away posting casino photos while I was unconscious," I said. "And your first question when you called wasn't how I was. It was whether I'd spoken to a lawyer." He switched tactics. His voice went soft. The performance of hurt. "Mom, I flew home the moment I knew how serious it was. You flew home 3 days later." I didn't have the full picture. The hospital called 14 times. I kept my voice level. I had earned that steadiness over 31 years of delivering hard news. They left messages. You had Wi-Fi. You had cell service. You had everything you needed to come home and you chose not to. The same way you came twice in 3 months while your father was dying. I paused. I made excuses for that too. I won't be making any more. His wife had not said a single word since they sat down. I noticed that. I thought I understood it. My son looked at Patricia. Whatever she's done here, I'd like to review the documents before anything is finalized. Patricia opened the folder. The documents are already finalized and properly witnessed. Mrs. Margaret underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation last week. I have the results here, signed by Dr. Okafor. She slid a copy across the table. She scored in the 92nd percentile for her age group on every measure. This estate plan is ironclad. He looked at the evaluation summary. His jaw tightened. Patricia began reading the will. To my granddaughter, a trust of $80,000 for education, managed by Patricia as trustee, with zero parental access until my granddaughter reached legal adulthood. His wife looked up at that. His eyes went immediately to what came next. To Danny, $50,000, for demonstrating that family is a choice and for choosing correctly. My son opened his mouth. Patricia continued without pausing. To the Philip Osei Memorial Fund at Mercy General Hospital, $40,000, directed toward the cardiac nursing unit where Philip received his care. To the Charlotte Community Care Network, $25,000. To my former colleagues at Mercy General's Nursing Staff Development Program, $15,000 in Philip's name. That's my son was counting, doing the math, his face going pale. That's most of the liquid estate, Patricia said calmly. Yes. He stood up. This is ridiculous. She just had a stroke. She's not thinking clearly. Patricia was already prepared. The cognitive evaluation is dated last Tuesday. Dr. Okafor's written assessment is in your copy of the file. Your mother is of sound mind and has been throughout this process. If you'd like to challenge the will, you're welcome to retain counsel. But I should tell you that challenges to properly witnessed, cognitively documented wills are expensive, time-consuming, and rarely successful. She looked at him. Particularly when the challenger is documented to have contacted a competing law firm about assuming power of attorney before any medical event occurred. His wife stood up quietly and picked up her bag. He turned to me. The performance finally slipped. The careful son, the concerned voice, the prepared narrative, all of it fell away, and what was underneath was smaller than I expected. Not monstrous, just small. Everything I did, he said, I did because I was worried about you. You were worried about the house, I said. There's a difference. You're going to be alone. You know that? You're going to get older, and you're going to need help, and I won't be there. I looked at Danny, who was sitting quietly with her hands folded, who had rearranged her schedule and slept in a hospital waiting room for a woman she barely knew. I know what it looks like when someone is there, I said. I've had a good example. He and his wife left. The door closed. Patricia gathered her folders with the careful efficiency of someone who had done this before and would do it again. Danny reached over and put her hand over mine without saying anything. I sat there in that serious room with the weight of the last few weeks settling into something I could finally carry. Not lightness, not yet, but clarity. The particular peace that comes when you stop bending yourself to fit a shape that was never designed for you. The weeks after the meeting were not quiet. He called every few days at first, cycling through the same positions he'd tried in Patricia's office, trying each one a second time as though a different delivery might produce a different result. His wife called once, her voice careful and low, to say she was sorry, that she had tried to talk to him, that she hoped I was healing. I thanked her and meant it. I didn't know her full story. I still don't. My granddaughter didn't call, which I expected. She was 9. She knew what she was told. But 3 weeks after the meeting, on a Saturday afternoon, I opened my front door to find her standing on my porch in rain boots, her backpack over one shoulder, holding a drawing she'd made on a piece of purple construction paper. A house. 2 stick figures. One short, one tall. Me and Grandma written across the top in the large looping letters of a 9-year-old who was still proud of her handwriting. Behind her, at the bottom of my driveway, was Danny's car. I knelt down as well as my body would let me, and I held my granddaughter for a long moment, and I didn't ask any questions about how she'd gotten there or what her parents knew. Some things are more important than logistics. We spent that afternoon making cookies, which my granddaughter told me were the second best cookies she'd ever had, which she also told me were the first best cookies she'd ever had, which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. That was 6 weeks ago. I'm writing to you now from my house on Clover Street, which I have decided not to sell. I repainted the kitchen in October. Philip would have loved the color a deep green, like the garden in July. I have started volunteering twice a week at a free clinic 2 miles from my house, doing intake assessments and patient education, because 31 years of nursing knowledge does not belong on a shelf. My speech has returned fully. My left side is 90%, which Dr. Okafor says will likely reach 100 with continued therapy. I walk every morning around the block, then 2 blocks, then this week 3, and I think of Philip on those walks, and I think of what I almost lost, and I think of the 14 phone calls that went unanswered, and I do not let myself forget what that felt like, because it is important to remember what you have decided to stop accepting. Danny came for dinner last Tuesday. My neighbor Helen brought wine. Roberta won at Scrabble, which she will mention for the rest of the year. My granddaughter texted me a photo of a frog she found in her backyard and asked me what kind it was, which I looked up carefully and responded to with full scientific accuracy because she deserves to be taken seriously. I have not heard from my son in 2 weeks. There is relief in that, and there is grief in that, and I have stopped pretending there is only one of those things. I am 67 years old. I spent my life caring for other people, and I was good at it, and I don't regret any of it. But I spent too long believing that the people I cared for most automatically understood what that care cost me, that love was implied, that being present was its own communication. I was wrong. Love is not implied. Presence is a choice. And when someone shows you, over and over, what they choose when choosing costs them something, believe them. The woman who held my head in her lap in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning had no reason to stay. She stayed. The son who had every reason to come home chose not to. Those are the facts, stripped of story and explanation and the comfortable narratives we tell to make unbearable things feel like misunderstandings. I am not angry anymore. Anger requires energy, and I have better uses for mine. I have a cookie recipe to perfect. I have a clinic full of patients who need someone to translate complicated things into language they can hold on to. I have a granddaughter who texts me photos of frogs. I have a walking route that gets longer every week. I have a life that is, for the first time in years, entirely mine. If my story reached you today, if any part of it landed somewhere you recognize, then I want you to hear this clearly. From a 7-year-old retired nurse who learned it the hard way. The people who love you will show up. They will not always do it perfectly. They will not always do it on time. But they will show up. And the people who are building a case against you in the background while you are busy making excuses for them, they have already told you everything you need to know. Listen, you do not have to earn your place in your own life. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Crystal Revenge for more stories about courage, second chances, and the families we build when biology isn't enough. Leave a comment below. I'd love to know where you're watching from and whether any of this felt familiar to you. Your story might be exactly what someone else needed to find today. Until next time, choose the people who choose you.